schools are getting vacant, whereas they are putting this RT Act on the private schools to put the 25% reserve quota for underprivileged students. That's good. Definitely, every child is required quality education. But part of that, like we have schools all over Vidarbha, and we have a strength in each class near about 300. So near about 80 students we have to admit under the RTE every year. And till date, we hardly get the money from the government. Whereas the facilities we are providing the same, which we are providing the students, those who are paying the full fees in the school. And apart from that, if the government is saying this is the education mafia, which is very wrong, and this is very hard to listen when we are doing something good for the society. In this situation, giving the equal education to all students, sometimes even the parents are becoming very arrogant, where their child is getting privileged to get this admission in this type of, under this type of RT and getting the quality education in these schools. But still, they are harassing the school, they are troubling the principal for getting the other facilities in the school. So in this situation, every school is facing problem. And I feel we must protest somewhere to this issue. We must speak about this issue. Many unions have been settled, like Indian Private Education, Private School Association and all. They are fighting for these to get the relief from the RT, or to get the, at least to compensate the money in the schools which are pending from last 3 to 4 years. The crores of rupees are pending towards the government for this under the RTs, for the RT students, whereas we are spending a lot of money for these students' education. So the very important issue, the first government should support the school by giving the fees on time. We are, as a private sectors, we are ready to educate them, but with the support of the government. I feel we, all the private school principals and the directors and the owners are sitting here. We must work together, and we must fight against this. Thank you.
Shailaji, do you think it's just a question of money, or I think, do you also notice this thing which Abha ma'am talked about, this increasing vigilantism about, parents now suddenly are more aware now. Suddenly it's become very populist for the ministers and SDM giving a notice that don't roll back your fees. We're talking about all these innovative products and ideas for our schools, but why would we bother innovating if money is not coming as per commitment? And on top of that, you're telling me this is how much fees I can charge. And this is the Fee Control Act of Gujarat, which has been implemented. The central government is actively considering that. And I think that's going to be a serious setback to the private school sector. So why is that we are not able to say anything, do it? Are we all, just because we are running under trusts, we are not willing to take up that mantle and go aggressively? Why is this? Why is our sector being beaten up all the time? And I mean, yesterday what happened in school in Gurgaon, I mean, there are some school groups, WhatsApp groups, and it's very, very sad what happened in that school. But all the schools were like, oh gosh, ab mere pe bhi aane wala hai. Ab fir shuru hoga. Now the 15-day cycle of media coming, parents coming, grandparents coming. Why are we the kind of scapegoats for everything, where everyone just can put up a PIL, put in an application? Why are we so weak as a sector?
Good afternoon, everybody. Let's understand exactly why the private school, came in the education sector. Traditionally, this was the job of the government to provide education to all. And probably the government has failed in its duty of providing quality education. That's the reason why the private schools started mushrooming up. Even if you look at today, the numbers, there are approximately around 1.5 million schools all across the country. And probably around 90–95% are the government schools. So hardly you have around 7 to 8% of the private schools, in the sector. Now, the gap between the quality education imparted by the government schools and the private schools definitely has been widening every year. Now, the government in its wisdom, whatever, tried to think that the gap is increasing, तो हम उनके तरफ पहुंच तो नहीं सकते, उनको gap तो छोटा कर सकते हैं. So probably they have done is that, like, by introducing all these acts like the RT Act, I don't think so. I personally, I'm running a minority school, so I'm outside the ambit of the RT Act, but I somehow don't disagree with the way the government has gone about implementing it. We need to understand exactly what we are wanting to have in India. Are we looking just for schools, to have our children just being literate or being employable? If you're going to have them literate, then just reading and writing is just perfectly fine. So if you actually see what the schools are doing, the government schools are doing, they're doing perfectly fine. But if you want our children to be employable, then you need knowledge and you need skills. Now, if you need knowledge and you need skills, so obviously you need to develop those kind of traits in the child. Now, the 21st century school, if you look at, they look at children having traits like collaborative thinking, teamwork, critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and many other such set of skills. Now, obviously, if you're going to be confined only to just the RT Act, which talks only of, how many students should be there in a class, the student-teacher ratio. Another thing is like, just keep on passing the students, irrespective whether they have, passed or failed. So definitely, probably the government then probably thought like, they just want to increase the gross enrollment ratio, which is probably around 12%. They had a target of maybe 20%, till 2012, 14, whatever. So if that is what you're looking at, I think so the aim of the government itself was wrong here. I feel that, the education sector, the vision in the education should be set by educationists and not by politicians. There comes a time where every successive governments, they try to do something wherein they want to be known in the field, like, they've done something, nice. Now, this is exactly what happened to RTE. Probably Mr. Kapil Sibal thought that he would, leave a mark behind. But on the contrary, he has created more mess, according to me, rather than, doing something good. Now, if the private schools are doing something good, and then, which I believe they are, and if at all, if India is known in the education sector, it's only because of the private, mostly because of the private schools. Now, by having the RT Act and then also having the fee capping act, I don't think so. It's like a double-edged sword for the private schools. You can't be professing, you need to have quality, and at the same time, you talk about, having restrictions. First of all, you already have restrictions in the sense you have many entry barriers in the education sector. You can set up schools only either through a trust or through a society, or maybe through Section 8 of the Companies Act. Once, given that, then you have to purchase land, construct a building, which definitely comes at very exorbitant pricing. After that, then you've got to run for permissions from the Mantralaya or from the local authorities or bodies, which again takes a lot of time. Now, having, doing all those things, then you need, to set up your infrastructure in place, which complements, the education for the 21st century. Now, what is happening is, on one side, the government is talking about Skill India, and on the other side, they are talking about, just, delivering, just, what I should say, just local education. Now, you can't be having both, sides, be working together. Now, if you want, the education sector to really, profess and go ahead, I feel you need to do a lot. I believe more than maybe 40% of, population is under the age of, 20. And you need to, put them in some jobs. And the jobs which of the future, definitely you will require these kind of traits and skills which I spoke about, which cannot be delivered in the way it is being delivered in the government schools. So coming back to the Fee Capping Act, I think the Gujarat government has done. Personally, I feel the calculation itself is a bit skewed. The RT Act talks about student-teacher ratio 1:30. And they also talk about 60 students in a classroom. So here you have approximately around 2 teachers per classroom of 60 students. Now, if the average salary of a class teacher in the primaries, is around 35,000 rupees. And if you divide this by, and multiply by 2, and if you divide by 60 students, so automatically you come to around 12,000 rupees. Now, the Gujarat government has said, like, they're capping the fee of the primary schools at around 15,000 or something. So if it's around 15,000 now, they have just taken the direct cost. They've not even taken the other operational cost, your other costs, towards, your infrastructure, technology. Now today, technology is an enabler. You need to have technology in the classroom. Now, that costs a lot of money, it costs a lot of investment. So I don't know exactly how this government is moving. It's mainly, trying to please the political masters, or probably trying to just be as vote banks. But I feel that if the government is interested in the future of its citizens, I think so they really need to look at this very strongly.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, indeed, I think populism is not just this government, it's the previous government, as you've named both of them now. So we're going to have wave after wave. It seems this populism is a side effect of democracy. I think we've seen it in the Baba cases as well, where nobody could have the guts to speak up against them, right? And but unfortunately, and yeah, interesting thing you mentioned that all the standards of RTE are input-based parameters, right? It's more than RTE, it's right to infrastructure more than right to education.
They don't talk about quality.
They
don't talk about measuring learning outcomes.
There is no learning outcomes at all.
So
yeah.
Like I said, you need to have the vision set out by educationists. I believe, that, and it should be a long-term vision. The vision should be for 20 years, which you can have benchmarks, revisit, every 3 to 5 years. And I feel the politician's job should only be to troubleshoot. Should only be to see, that if in case there are any hiccups, in case if probably investments are required in the right place, if probably permissions are required, their job should only to ensure that, that the job is being taken forward here.
See, yeah, putting educationists as well, the private sector has not exactly been role models. We've got case complaints of schools asking kids to buy 5 different sets of uniform for 5 days, a school ordering underwear to the children. There's this joke going around on WhatsApp where the school's asking the kids, the parents to buy the atta, dal, chini also from the school. So we private schools have also not been, exactly role models for where the government can, there is definitely a trust deficit happening on both sides. I know 95% people are not like that, and I'm sure we're not like that. But those 5% are what create the noise, right? So those 5%, those noise that reaches the government. So obviously, how do we overcome that trust deficit? That trust deficit is still there, right? You talk to somebody in the government, they were like, private school, these guys are, we know what you guys do.
Unfortunately, the media plays a large role in this, is that unless they don't sensationalize news, the newspapers don't sell. So I feel is that, you can't, for a few black sheep, you cannot blame the entire community. Let's say, you have, some businessmen who are not, who are probably doing business the wrong way. But that doesn't mean you can generalize the entire business community and say that they're all cheats. I'm sorry.
As an educator, I want to ask you, is this policy seems ill-conceived from the policy point of view, but in the classroom, and a lot of educators had these concerns about the difference between the haves and the have-not in the same classroom. How will the social integration happen? Is it a good thing to do it? Is it not a good thing? Parents saying that, will my son learn those words, those language? What about values? So how do you see, have you seen it being implemented? Do you think there is a social reason where for private schools, we still have a lot to gain through it? Are there elements of the RTE Act which you feel are still, which should be held on to, or do you think, what's your stand on the RTE Act overall? Do you think there are good and bad things as well, or do you completely feel that it's totally ill-conceived?
Well, we've been debating the RTE Act since it was introduced in 2009, and that debate continues. There are 2 ways of looking at this. One is the micro level of looking at a school and what's happening there. So you're taking in 25% free students with some commitment from the government, and it is being honored, somewhere it's not being honored. I've just come back from a trip in Chhattisgarh, where they swear by the government that they are very diligent, they pay the money, and whatever has been agreed and fixed, they do that. Maharashtra doesn't seem to pay. There are schools that are lamenting that. And so at the micro level, there's a perspective that, well, if we have agreed on something, we'll do our best, you do your best, and let this happen. But from a macro level, if we look, these are children of our own country. And you know, why is it that in the PISA test, international test, we just participated once and we were so horribly ranked that the government decided we won't do this again? So there is a problem here. Now, if we can help these children, and finally it's the country, and if we can bring them in, we can somehow shoulder that responsibility. Clearly, the government is not up to it, it's not able to do it. Can we pitch in within the parameters of fairness and justice and practicability? Why not? So this is one perspective of this. Coming back to this issue that we have here, I won't be too worried about fee capping and all of that, because there is a rule of law in this land. And we have the Supreme Court to thank for a lot of things. We educationists have a lot to thank for it. Also, the Supreme Court has indicated that there is a point beyond which the government cannot go in fee capping and controlling of all of that. So there is some hope over there. Coming to the government, there's something that I have realized, that most governments, with due respect to all governments and agencies, most governments are reactionary in nature. I'm yet to see a proactive government that plans and has a vision for the future and has, at least in the field of education. Past 20 years, all the decisions, all the strategies, all the plans, all the programs that the government has unfolded over the past 2 decades or so, there has been some driving motive behind that. I'll give you some examples. CBSE came up with this changes in its assessment program of summative and formative because of a spate of suicides and a lot of turmoil that was happening, a lot of stress, so they said, let's change it. But they didn't do that before. RTE, even the National Curriculum Framework of 2005, which is a very fantastic document, I hope you've all read that, where, I'm taking too much of time, where it talks about student-centered learning, about too much, the ill effects of too much competition in schools, about a whole school approach to value education, but a lot of things. We think that the government has done it by itself. No, these are part of the Millennium Development Goals that were signed on, and the government is being forced to introduce these changes, and so is RTE. Now, if we come to fee capping, what is forcing the hand of the government? Because if it's reactionary, something must have happened for it to come and intervene and say, all right, this is a cap on your fees. I think this is a manifestation of a problem that is happening in most of our schools. The not so healthy relationship that we have with parents, a lack of trust. I have worked with a lot of schools and I've realized, and they say this is a problem. You take any PTM, any PTA, and most of the time we are blaming each other. Parents are blaming the school, we are blaming the parents, and then this is the relationship that we have. So what kind of support are we going to expect from them? They will definitely come outside the school when it gets really bad. They will come, they will protest, and then the government has to do something. So what does it do? It comes up with fee capping laws and so on and so forth. I think we can sit here and say, all right, the government is not fair and they are doing things and we should protest and all of that. But I think there's another perspective. Is there something that we can do? And that's a takeaway from here. I think we can. We need to find out, is there a way to improve relationship with the parents? For me, in my school, parents are our biggest allies. If there is this relationship of trust with the parents, it takes time, it's very difficult to do, but if we can pull it off, you will not have any such problem. You will not have the least of problem. They are the ones that will come and back up the school, they back up the teachers, they will scold their own children for whatever problems that there are, and they support the school. So I think that's something that we need to start thinking about, instead of really talking about things that we may not even have any control over.
That's interesting. I was going to wrap that up by saying that, you talk about sensationalization in the media and the government as well. Those things seem to be beyond our control, but what is in our control is that trust deficit. I think all things that we are talking about is trust deficit with the government, trust deficit with the media, trust deficit with the parents. So where do you think, how do you think schools, that question is all of you, what steps do you think can schools do when it's something important for everybody? I mean, I think it's the smallest of gestures, not just posting pictures on their Facebook page of the latest event. I think it's much beyond that, where parents start trusting you and your intentions, right? So how do you address this, and how have you, I'm sure you've looked at this aspect before.
Particularly, there should be a very transparency in the school working. If we have that transparency, if the parents are approved that transparency and they are cooperative to the school, whatever the facilities we are providing in the school or whatever the services they are getting from the school, if they are approved for that, and whatever we are doing, if we are selling the uniforms and the book, why we are selling the uniforms and the book in the school, there should be a reason behind that. Otherwise, the parent has to roam around the city to get one another book from different shops. That's the reason why we are selling the books in the school and we are providing that as a facility to the parents. So, but again, that was an issue taken by the media, and it was a very big issue, and the private publication and the NCRT and all these things were there last year. Again, it was resolved, and we come to the original decision. But if we have a transparency...
Nothing was resolved. It just, after some time, it dies out. People lose interest. Next April, the news is going to be back again.
Definitely. We cannot guarantee it for that. But if we have a clear idea to the parents about the facilities, the particularly fee capitation act is not difficult to conduct in the school, or to have a proper fee structure with the consultation with the parents and whatever the executive body and the PTA and PTM and all. So I feel that that is the trust which we can gain by involving the parents in the school activities. Sometimes definitely few parents out of 100%, I can say the 10% parents are there who are very critics and who are creating the issues in the school and who are always against to the school. It is anticipated